CIGTV News Update, I'm Donna Bush. Thanks for joining us. Joint Ministerial Council meetings between British Overseas Territories and Her Majesty's government started on Tuesday with welcome remarks from our Premier, the Honourable ALDEN McLaughlin, who is President of the United Kingdom Overseas Territories Association, or UKOTA. A Premier's office press release tells us that the Tuesday's meetings focused on discussions about the European Union's exit negotiations, or Brexit, and contingency planning, including updates on the domestic parliamentary process, trade policies, and development funding. Now, discussions also included issues of concerns regarding British Overseas Territories passports and child safeguarding, and specialist details of overseas territories-related environmental work through the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. An overview of planning for a no-deal scenario in Brexit, trade policies post-Brexit, and potential changes to funding through the Overseas Development Fund. Overseas Territories leaders were again advised that the EU funding that supports environmental and other projects in the territories will be guaranteed by the UK until 2020. British Overseas Territories passports and, again, child safeguarding were also other topics discussed at the JMC meetings, which will continue today with sessions on disaster management, financial services, trade and investment, and the constitutional relationship with the United Kingdom. And as the President of the Political Council of the United Kingdom Overseas Territories Association, or UKOTA, the Premier opened and hosted the first UKOTA Environment Workshop in London on Monday.
The environment, and in particular climate change, is an increasingly important issue worldwide, but particularly to the overseas territories, many of which are low-lying and therefore significantly impacted by climate change and the rise in sea levels. But also more broadly, the UK Overseas Territories represent 90% of the UK's biodiversity, and we have a whole lot of endangered and very unique species. And so it's very important to the territories themselves, not just for the UK's purposes, for us to protect. A workshop for JMC on environment issues is something that I think, and the members of UKOTA think, is very important. And so, as President of UKOTA, I was delighted to be able to host this very first workshop of this nature at a JMC. And so far, I think it's been very well received, and a lot of new ideas, a lot of concerns are being voiced. I was particularly pleased today to be able to announce that the Cayman Islands has declared another 634 acres as protected land in the Cayman Islands, which is the same as national parks in most other places. And that has brought the total land protected in the Cayman Islands to about 6.3% of the overall land mass of the Cayman Islands, which I think is pretty significant, and a clear indication as to how important the Cayman Islands views the protection of the natural environment.
The National Trust relies on or requires funding. We're an NGO, and there's so much to be done that we need to be able to access funding. And with Brexit happening, it's a real critical time for many, I think, in the overseas territory, because we sort of potentially falling between the gap. There's an amazing array of people here today from all different backgrounds, NGOs, ministries, foundations. So I'm hoping to hopefully, meet with people from different foundations that I wasn't aware of before. The Element Fund, I believe, is here. That was a new one to me. But also just to network with other people who are facing similar challenges. It's great to be here to network with our own ministers and promote our causes.
As you just heard, the Premier was able to share the good news of the procurement of 634 acres of protected land in the Cayman Islands. This has now increased the protected land area in Cayman to 4,111 acres. The Premier highlighted that overseas territories are custodians of environmental assets of global importance due to the fact that over 90% of the UK's biodiversity is in the territories, with many endangered species. Also, that the territories hold a third of the world's albatross, a quarter of the world's penguins, and the largest coral reefs on Earth. Lastly, the territories make up over 70% of the UK's marine estate in the entire world. In other news, this time from our sister island of Cayman, the national airline flew its newest aircraft, the Boeing 737 MAX 8 there, On Wednesday morning, BRAC residents, including officials, were out to welcome the newest aircraft to the island. We'll have more on that story on CIGTV News Update for you on Thursday evening. Also making our headlines as part of the objective to reduce recidivism rates and advance rehabilitation efforts for its clients, the Department of Community Rehabilitation is putting in place a new community supervision technique known as CHANGES. With full support from the Ministry of Financial Services and Home Affairs, the DCR has made it a strategic priority to enhance the level of supervision offered to high-risk offenders placed on community-based orders by the courts and the Conditional Release Board. CHANGES stands for Change Agents in Community Supervision, is an adapted training program based on the existing Strategic Training Initiative in Community Supervision. Now, a group of 12 probation officers as well as senior officers recently completed a 5-day training session on the new method. The trainers will provide ongoing support to the probation officers through monthly meetings, individual feedback sessions, and refresher workshops in the months following their participation in the training. Now, to ensure that they are effectively applying the newly learned strategies and techniques, these are the steps that will be taken. And that ends today's news update. If you missed it, you can catch it on the Cayman Islands Government Facebook page as well as a YouTube channel. That's the CIG Television YouTube channel, that is. For now, I'm Donna Bush, as always, thanking you for joining us, wishing you a wonderful and, of course, a very safe evening, and inviting you back here again tomorrow. Until then, bye-bye for now.
Boating, fishing, and water sports in the Cayman Islands are great, but keep a cool head. Here are 7 tips for fun and safe sea outings. Number 1. Use a checklist to plan your outing. Check the weather forecast, make a float plan, and share it with someone who is remaining on land, stating where you're going, with whom, and when you're expected to return. Visit your nearest marine supply store to get your safety gear. This includes signaling mirrors, whistles, and a flare kit. It's also very important to have onboard flotation devices and life vests for each person. There are different types of vests. Some are for water sport activities such as snorkeling, and others are for going on offshore boating or on fishing trips. Number 2. These items can be lifesavers in case of an accident or bad weather. Number 3. Use a motor kill switch, especially if you're boating alone. In case of a leak or breakdown, always stay with the boat until help arrives. If you capsize, an emergency beacon or locator device can send a distress signal to inform the authorities of your location. Larger flares will indicate distress to a boat, airplane, or search and rescue officials. Number 4. In addition to sunscreen, food, and beverages, it would be smart to have a cell phone. Make sure your marine radio works. Cayman boaters use Channel 16 to communicate. Number 5. Also, don't forget your anchor and sufficient rope. Number 6. Boat operators should be familiar with the local waters and reefs, as well as the capabilities and functions of the vessels they are using. Always obey the rules of the sea and the marine environment, and have courtesy for others. Number 7. Alcohol and salt water do not mix, especially if you're the captain. Some useful contact numbers are 911. The RCIPS Marine Base is 649-7710, and the Port Authority is 949-2055. Smooth sailing, all!
Did you know that planning permission is required for an addition, alteration, or any material change to your house? The 10% rule no longer exists. Did you know you should check with the department, as a planning and permit application may be required?